Okay, and this week we have CV 2025 1094, an improper escape. In one of the routines, it may lead to SQL injection / RCE condition. So a cool one to deploy into your lab to see how that plays out. We have two topics to talk about this week. One will be the recent buzz about weakening encryption and the disabling of the iCloud's end-to-end encryption that was talked about, the request made by the UK, sort of unseen, sort of way back in the encryption wars. And efficiency. Now I'm talking about this because apparently LLMs is one of the key elements that people like to talk about, and say that it will solve the problem of efficiency, especially when we're talking about development. Now, I've already scratched the surface on that. One of the key elements of any development is the new thing, or the product itself is built by seniors and then maintained by juniors. That's how you profit from it. In the gross majority of situations, okay, you might have companies that are so big and have so big budgets that this might not necessarily be entirely true, or a mix of situations. But generally speaking, that's one of the ways to make things way more manageable financially. Now, why am I talking about this? One of the key factors that we keep hearing, and to be fair, most of the people that talk about this and say what I'm about to say are not actually technical. Most of them can't distinguish a computer from a brick. That's usually how I describe them, or a keyboard from something else. But it is true. One of the key misconceptions about it is, and it's almost as misinterpreted as a container. Like, we still see a lot of documentation describing containers as a virtual machine. They're not. Okay. I've addressed this once here, and I'll keep saying this. It's not a virtual machine. It doesn't have a hypervisor on it, so it's not a virtual machine. There's no virtualization layer on it. And so there is another topic that is equally misunderstood. Speed is oftentimes misinterpreted as efficiency. Someone that makes something really fast, and then he's really good at it. It might not be necessarily true. And one of the key things that we're starting to see, or we'll see more with LLMs, is low and beginning up to intermediate developers will be able to craft a staggering amount of code in a short period of time. Something that is not as seen in previous times. That it's a good assistance. It's keen to having someone starting off in development without IntelliSense, right? You need to spend more time in the documentation doing that. It's one of the reasons why I like Dash so much. And so, is it true? If you do a lot of code, you're really efficient. One of my mentors, I might say, that taught me a lot in development, used to say that if you write a lot of code faster, it means that you will do more mistakes also faster as well. So you can't have both. Either you do things really fast or you do things really well. There is a mid ground that's called seniorship. When you find the balance between the speed and the amount of code you produce with enough care to reduce the amount of times that you spend a number of time working on something, and in the end, only 10% of it works. that's a telltale sign that you're going too fast. Or if your bug tracker is exploding with bugs most of the year, that's another telltale sign that you might be going too fast. LLMs will allow for this to happen when way sooner than it used to happen. When you reach a particular point in your career, in development, especially, this is where you're going to see this the most, I would say. You will be able to start to notice that you can speed up. You can build a significant chunk of whatever you're trying to build by looking and imagining how that thing operates, right? The whole concept, the structure, the fundamentals of it, and then start building the features on top. And with some level of abstraction already when you're starting off. And this is not easy to achieve. But the application or whatever you're building will structure itself out as it builds up. With LLMs, you can skip some sort of this process initially to some extent, because you will interact with it. There are two ways. Either you use it in a Copilot scenario where it completes and you can ask for small bits of code, or you ask for the entire chunks of things that you then need to work on integrating it. Either way, you're going to have to work. I would say the bigger the code, the more likely you are from having issues, because you have a lot of you have more things to worry about. And it's easier to find potential problems or stress points when you're focused on small blocks. I need to do this sort of operation, and then the block is created, and then you realize, okay, this is using user input. I might have an SSRF here, or I might have something like that, or I might have a risk condition here. And those situations are fairly common. Now, if you're not a senior and you're taking everything for granted like this, most of the AI systems these days, the code that it crafts, it needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work on error management, because it's one of the biggest, it's one of the hardest things to do, and to do input validation and a lot of other code quality related issues that you need to pay attention for. Now, a junior up to now was essentially grown and was built under someone's wing, and steadily would increase its grip on the code, and so his efficiency would grow as well. So in this, we would be usually somewhat have a parallel with the amount of code it would be able to produce, or the number of features it would be able to implement or contribute to on his own. How efficient he is, you can tell by the number of test cases that go, and how many of them fail over the week, how many regressions you have, and all of those very interesting and important things. We all know that with LLMs, what's going to happen is the amount of code that is being able to produce is higher, because it has a dedicated assistant to help them out to craft specific pieces of code, but it will be mostly incomplete, right? And so it needs to integrate that with everything else. There will be obviously things context-wise that would need severe adjustments, and those it will be usually when things will start to take a few stress points. One of the biggest and one of the direct side effects of that is the same when you have a big team of junior developers. You have a lot of code, a lot of duplication. Duplicated code, it will be probably one of the biggest things to to address at that point, because again, abstraction is something that you acquire with time. And so this is one of the reasons why I say that LLMs will change things, but I can't really see how things will work out in the future. It is interesting on one point and very scary on the other, because we all know that from the business perspective, the idea is to have shorter periods of development so that you ship more product out to increase the product, to increase the profit. Sorry. And so the emphasis there will be to have cheaper developers building a lot of code in a short amount of time, what I call the nightmare. And so we could actually see this in a different way, right? We could have used this in a way to assist the development in a completely different manner. Train it in abstraction, give it a higher abstraction context, concepts, things that really are really effectively difficult for the developer to trace, like risk conditions, for example. Scenarios like that. Go, for example, Golang is to some extent is in some cases is able to detect race conditions, and you can actually there's a mode that you can run that will tell you that. A friend of mine just told me this about this summer. It got me really interested into that. But those are the things that can really help out the product, right? Race conditions are really tough. They usually lead to weird situations in production that are seen only in peculiar scenarios. Either huge stress loads or peculiar situations that emerge. They're not easily triggered, and usually have pretty fun outputs. I've been in a case with a bank, for example, where a risk condition led to two transfers being authorized with a single two-factor authentication token. That's the coolest example I can get out of the top of my head. And so those being able to feed an entire product into something that will able to identify something that I had a bunch of rules for in my CI/CD back in my days, to detect code duplication and all those sort of things that once you reach a particular point, when your product, when the application reaches the 5,000 lines of code, 50,000 lines of code, 20,000. It's not easy to find those things on your own, right? And so if you have something on a CI/CD to detect that sort of behavior, you're able to then tailor the abstractions of the lower layers of the implementation to take care of those situations and provide APIs so that the features don't have a lot of code duplicated. Now, why code duplication is such a big thing, and why a lot of frameworks say that you don't repeat yourself and stuff like that, is because the more code you have, the more memory you use, and the more duplication of code you have, the more inefficient you will be. So having something generic makes the code smaller, more concise, and with less duplication, being smaller means faster. These days, not that not everyone cares these days, to tell you the truth. But it is equally important. It's one of the first things I would do when I had to visit a client to optimize code. And so I'm interesting to see how things are going to evolve code wise. I've been seeing an interesting set of outcomes. An LLM that was able to create a game and tailor another LLM of its own to learn how to play a game, and even build something that was able to play a game on its own. So we have quite an impressive. It was just a snake game. It's not that much complex, but it is an interesting set of things that are quite evolving. But we tend to forget something. And I'll close this topic with this. There's a very important detail about this. One is the amount of resources that is required for us to run that. And I usually joke around saying that we might find our extension doing that, because the resources that it requires to consume and to cool down those data centers is worrying. If you look into the Guardian's report on that on OpenAI, I think it was either last year or 2 years ago. When I read it, I felt like I underestimated my initial aspect of it. I already had an idea it was pretty bad. Didn't know it was that bad. And the other side is recently the model, one of the models that got released said that it was able to digest an entire movie. Okay. So to digest a product like Nginx, for example, has 284,000 lines, something around like that, and it is 284K, around that's a few smaller numbers down below, but the big factor is the amount of zeros that I want to emphasize here. It's a lot of code to go through. And considering the capabilities of it times the number of people are using, you're going to spend a staggering number of resources to make that fly. Now the question is it more profitable than to teach people how to do code properly? Because the thing that I'm getting interested into understanding is, will it have an effect on how you learn? Because we all know that for now, the only way for you to learn something is to make shitloads of mistakes, crazy loads of them. The more mistakes you make, the more you understand it. You see code go off, and then you'll see, I've seen that error somewhere. And you look into it, that was it. It's the experience talking, right? You look into something you've never seen before, you'll go, I have no idea what this is. And then you'll look into the code, and you will look into a higher context of the code. You need to dig through a lot in order to understand what that is. And eventually, hopefully, you'll find it and find a way to craft it. And that's a symptom. I see this as a symptom to what some call the debugger symptom. When you find a bug, first thing you do is put it on the debugger and try to trigger it to see where it crashes and how it crashes. This is what every junior does. And then create another condition to block that from happening. And that's how your software gets bloated. And that's not always true, right? That's usually described as addressing the symptom, not a problem. You need to understand why that condition reached that particular point instead of trying to solve it there. And so that is a key difference of that. And then there are a lot of projects out there that follow this trend. They keep on treating symptoms instead of addressing the whole problem. Then the whole chain of bugs keeps emerging until either someone picks it up and tries to solve them for good, or the whole thing catches fire and disappears. I suspect that it's not going to go well. I think we're going to throw a staggering amount of cash into this. And I think seniorship in software development will change significantly for the worst in terms of experience. Because you don't build memory if you're not solving your problems yourself. And so it will be interesting. And I'm really happy I'm not in development. Now, the other topic I wanted to talk about is about encryption. And is one that splits a lot of people. I've been up close, and I know for the fact that there are many attempts on weakening encryption. More than actually that I can actually talk about, and openly about the subject. But it is worrying, and to some extent actually a bit disappointment, and surprise. The topic in the news is about something about weakening or turning off the encryption for UK users. Not really sure how that would fly off in a Apple size product. There's something about it that sounds suspicious, about the description. How you can pinpoint something like that with that amount of precision is it doesn't smell good. But regardless of that, the news is about UK and a request about the government of iCloud backups, encrypted iCloud backups being the encryption being turned off or weakened. We all know that with the more power you have, the more likely the more likely you have to become corrupt. We live in a day where most of everyone's lives is on that device that has that's inside your pocket. We all know that those devices, for the features that they have, and this is not tinfoil talk, we're just illustrating something that is actually telling where you are, right? There's a road in Porto where the road is so close to the buildings, and the buildings are so high that if you look on Google Maps, it will say that there's traffic in there. It will show the road in red. If you go in the road, when I passed there last time I passed there, the road was empty. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of people in those buildings that it's actually that's being used to know if there's any or if there are any cars stopping there. Now we all know the GPS is an error on its positioning, and that's an effect of that. It's clearly a listening device. It keeps track of you, right? It can tell where you are. That is not new, right? We trade that for a commodity, be able to communicate with anyone. Let's put it anywhere, because we all know, at least from where I'm from, it's not really anywhere, right? They say they have a whole country coverage, but that's not true. But that's not I'm not going to go there. But that's a given fact, right? You have a lot of your corporate emails in it. You have a lot of your personal stuff on it, notes, pictures of your family, and so on. Private thoughts, maybe, if you're that crazy. And things like that on your device. It's basically almost your whole life, I would say. It's an exaggeration, but not knowing who is able to access that information and for what reason is not up for debate, in my opinion. It's not worth it. Because we don't know. We all have things that could be used against us. For the more honest you have, the most honest person on the face of the earth would still have something that could be used against it. And we all know that with that amount of power, things become really, really tough. especially considering the fact that some of the companies and the way these big companies work, they rely heavily on contractors and sub-hiring in some cases. So you don't have you say, oh, such and such company is responsible for this and that. But once that information is out, right? And that's a huge problem. That's an immense problem, because once the damage is done, then you're up. And so having someone that is able to, that if it wanted to, and let's face it, no one really knows how those things are managed unless you work there, right? Knowing that anyone or any let's, in this case, a particular government can sift through an staggering amount of people's backups and peek inside to search for things that they don't like. I mean, I don't want to be the free speech realm here. When I was a kid, my grandfather said me this once: your freedoms stop when someone else's. Your freedoms will stop when someone else's will start. Their freedom to search for things that they. The big flag here is criminal activity, right? Severe criminal activity. Don't want to go into details of it. If you read the article, will be there for sure. It's actually there in the second or third paragraph. That's basically the flag, right? But who's doing that? How sure are we that the person will not see something that will take advantage of it? And even if we exclude the extortion scenario, right? Let's say you're sifting through employee information, and let's say the company is in the stock market, and the people that are going through that piece of information see information that could be used to take advantage, to be in an advantaged position in the stock market. Who's going to know that happened? Because for all intents and purposes, you shouldn't be able to sit through to look into other people's information unless you're suspicious about something. And that's the part that gets me really uncomfortable with that situation. That's dangerous territory, and that's for one. For the second one is, we all know that the government is not the one who actually has more means to pull out such an attack. We've seen recently an impressive and quite a staggering attacks against many corporate and governmental organizations around the world with a significant amount of success. And knowing that you're weakening the systems, you're opening everything up, or everyone up, not just the average person, but also the governmental side as well. Because there are two things. There are three types of people. Those who don't know and don't care. Those who know but do their best, and those who know and care and do everything they can to mitigate that risk, right? The government's not even in this list because most of the people in government, in my opinion, are 3 hairs away from being munching bananas in caves. So, I that's my take on the reason why they go this far. They don't really know what they're doing. And so, with that in mind, if someone hacks into that thing and gets a hold of data, let's say they get a hold of a lot of pictures in there, and they create a deep fake, because now you can use pictures and voice samples to create deepfakes with an staggering degree actually quite believable, I might add. You have something, right? How well how bad things can go, it depends on the other side's creativity, and we all know that that's not a problem on the other side of the fence. And creativity is one of their strong points, and weakening encryption is not the way to go. Now, to be fair, who is going to use the iCloud to store backups? When you have a price tag on it, devices have an impressive amount of disk space, and that means you need to pay for that as well. If you have the cash, maybe you will be in that realm, right? We also know that once these sort of things are known, whoever is doing something less legal, let's put it, now knows that that's actually a problem. Now, only a very dumb and couldn't find a better word, sorry. Only a really, really clumsy bad person, let's put it that, like criminal, would use a device, right? Put all his crown jewels on it, unprotected, and would be, in this day and age, talking in plain text. It doesn't make any sense, right? The likelihood of that happening is okay. We've seen that happen in the past. Initially, in the early stages, when that was flown and flagged around like a huge feature, right? Security and encryption, and no one has access to your device. And now it's fingerprinted and blah blah blah, and all those things. And we see a few cases of unfortunate cases where a few criminals got caught with such devices, and then with a big effort, eventually they break in. The reality is, you will break in if you know the individual, if you know the device, if you know enough about that person, about their circle, their trust circle. You will get into that device. That's not a problem. That is definitely not a problem if you have a legitimate case, though. And so we're trying to get into a Minority Report kind of situation, right? They want to build something that it's actively seeking for problematic behavior on that's what I see it, because otherwise I don't see any other justification for that, right? Why would anyone want to be able to pull anyone's backup, device backup that it can, to sit it through without proper cause or reason for it? It doesn't make any sense. Are you that curious about someone else's life? Is what comes into my mind. Now, we know that most and the interest about this is to fight like pretty horrible crime groups, criminal groups, with a specific set of targets in mind. And I do think that that's a problem that needs to be solved. Don't get me wrong. I just don't see that as being a good enough justification to break something that may have a bigger consequence on the other side. To catch a few deviant minds, you'll put everyone at risk. And in here is right now, once the news breaks out, is anyone that doesn't care, really. Because if you care now, you're going to do your backups like me, right? Have a case upstairs, has a drive, it's encrypted. That's my iCloud. I plug the drive, I do my backup. Now, why I'm that careful? NDAs. Crazy loads of them, and when you start in this in the assessment thing, initially you may have nightmares. I did, being fearful that it would go into an airport and someone pulls my laptop and I would be in trouble. Not because of the things I have in there, but because of the reports I have in there and the amount of NDAs that would be violated just by opening that thing up. And so I usually have a cleanup procedure that I do every time I travel, and my backups are encrypted in my house, offline. And that's the reason why I say that anyone that cares and is really careful, you're not going to find it that way. I would say that the people that you really want, that someone really wants to be put away, the ones that are actually orchestrating those sort of operations, will be probably even more careful than I am. And I'm really not that careful. I have minimal amount of worries, mostly because of the work I do. And I don't work for a 3-layer agency. I work for a regular company doing regular pen tests, but we do sign a lot of NDAs. And it's true that a lot of times in those reports are ways for you to compromise a company. And if that gets out, right, that becomes a problem, because if it gets out too early, it's a huge problem for the company. In this case, for a client, and that cannot happen. And so minimal worries. We know that happens. Being in the field and knowing the technology, I know that the risk will not pay off. I'm interested to see how the pushback will be. I really think that we should have a lot more engineers and technical people in those seats instead of lawyers and non-technical folks, because they really don't know what they're doing, and they're eventually going to get us in trouble if they didn't get us already. And so that is going to be up for this week. And now I'm preparing a few other things. Hope you enjoyed the Ansible video. Working on the audio, it was not my best. I had to record that on top. Let's see how this one goes. Right, change a few things here in the setup. Hopefully this will be better. So I'll see you next time. Stay frosty.